Welcome to the Marketing Behind Rapid Growth, the podcast where we explore the strategies, decisions, and growth engines behind some of the world's most successful technology companies. Today, we're talking about Cursor. Picture a Microsoft conference room sometime in 2023. Somewhere on a whiteboard is a chart of GitHub Copilot's growth, a product with the full weight of Microsoft's sales force, its cloud infrastructure, and its marketing machine behind it. Nobody in that room is worried about four young founders working out of a small office, building a code editor nobody had heard of yet. They should have been, because within 3 years, that obscure little editor would not just compete with Copilot, it would outgrow it, outpace Slack and Dropbox on the fastest climb to $100 million in revenue the software industry had ever recorded, and ultimately get acquired by SpaceX in an all-stock deal worth roughly $60 billion. And here's the detail that should stop any marketer in their tracks. Cursor did almost none of this with advertising. No major ad campaigns. No army of salespeople kicking down doors. It got there by treating the product itself as the entire marketing department. This is the story of how that happened and what it tells us about where marketing is headed in the age of AI. A failed first bet. Cursor's founders, Michael Truell, Amen Sanger, Swaleh Asif, and Arvid Lunemark, started in 2022 with a strong conviction and a wrong target. They believed large language models were about to reshape knowledge work. That part, they got right. But they were wary of building yet another developer tool in an already crowded market, so they looked for a quieter, less contested space. They landed on mechanical engineering. The team built an autocomplete tool for CAD software, something like a co-pilot for engineers designing physical parts. They scraped files. They trained custom models. They interviewed prospective users. And the traction simply never came. The problem wasn't the technology. It was the founders. They were software engineers trying to build for mechanical engineers, a discipline whose daily friction points they didn't intuitively understand. You can study a workflow from the outside, but you cannot fake the instincts that come from having lived inside it. That failure left them with a foundational lesson that would shape everything that followed. You cannot market, or even build, your way into a workflow you don't deeply understand. So the founders went back to the one workflow they knew better than almost anyone alive: software development itself. The decision to own the interface. When Cursor pivoted to coding tools, the landscape looked brutal. GitHub Copilot was the entrenched incumbent, backed by Microsoft's distribution and already on its way to hundreds of millions in recurring revenue. Going head-to-head looked like a fight nobody sane would pick. But Copilot had a structural weakness hiding inside its biggest strength. It was a plugin, a layer bolted onto an existing editor. A plugin can suggest a line of code here and there, but it cannot fundamentally change how an editor understands a multi-file project, runs a terminal command, or walks through a debugging session. Cursor made the harder, riskier choice. Instead of building another extension, it forked Visual Studio Code, the most widely used code editor in the world, and one that happened to be open source. To a lot of engineers watching at the time, this looked like wasted effort. Why rebuild an entire editor when you could ship a lightweight plugin in a fraction of the time? It was, in fact, the single most important strategic decision the company made. By forking VS Code, Cursor inherited years of mature, battle-tested infrastructure for free. And in exchange, it gained full control over the interface itself, the layer where genuine AI-native differentiation actually has to live. There was a second, quieter benefit. Because Cursor sat on the VS Code foundation, every shortcut, every extension, every theme a developer had already configured just worked, from the very first launch. The cost of trying Cursor wasn't measured in hours of relearning a new tool. It was close to zero. And when the cost of trying something is near zero, word of mouth travels at a different speed entirely. Marketing to the monks. With a working product, Cursor faced a problem that would sink most startups. How do you market a newcomer against a competitor with virtually unlimited reach? Its answer ran against every instinct of conventional growth marketing. While Copilot and the rest of the market chased mass appeal, a story about democratizing coding for everyone, Cursor narrowed its aim. The founders, by their own description, lived like monks in the company's early days, obsessing over the product itself rather than sales decks or campaigns. They built specifically for the most demanding professional engineers, targeting the hardest workflows in the job: multi-file edits, project-wide context, sophisticated agent behavior. Not the easiest customer to win, the most respected one. This was underneath the surface a disciplined segmentation strategy. A casual developer who saves 10 minutes a day doesn't tell anyone about it, but a senior engineer who watches Cursor refactor a sprawling years-old codebase in minutes becomes something far more valuable than a customer. They become a credible source. And credible sources are the cheapest, most effective advertising a company can buy, except you can't buy it. You have to earn it. When the product becomes the campaign. Because Cursor had built for power users first, it had unintentionally engineered something even better than a sales pitch: a word-of-mouth engine. The company's internal bias was to ship fast and to favor features that were visible and shareable in the moment someone used them. It leaned all the way into the vibe coding wave sweeping through developer culture. When a video of an 8-year-old building an app with Cursor went viral, the company didn't manufacture that moment with a paid campaign. It simply let it happen and let the community carry the story forward. That was the pattern, again and again. Developers posted their own clips of Cursor rewriting large code bases in real time. Cursor didn't need to explain its value proposition in a slide deck because its product was generating proof of that value proposition voluntarily, in public, for free. Pricing reinforced the loop instead of getting in its way. Cursor offered a free tier generous enough to do real, meaningful work. Around 2,000 completions, not a crippled trial designed to frustrate you into paying. That was enough for a developer to reach a genuine aha moment before ever being asked for a credit card. Once they hit the ceiling, upgrading to the $20 Pro tier required almost no friction at all. And crucially, Cursor refused to be seduced by vanity metrics. It didn't chase raw signups. Its North Star metric was paid power users, people relying on the tool 4 to 5 days a week. Every product decision was tested against one question: does this pull an existing user deeper into their actual work day after day? That discipline is its own form of marketing strategy because it keeps a company from optimizing for the wrong kind of growth. Smuggled into the enterprise. By late 2024, Cursor's product-led momentum was undeniable among individual developers, but getting from tens of millions to billions in revenue required something else: enterprise adoption. And Cursor's path into the enterprise looked nothing like a typical B2B sales motion. Insiders came to call it developer smuggling. Individual engineers loved the product enough to simply expense the $20 Pro tier on their own corporate cards. One by one, Cursor crept into organizations like OpenAI, Shopify, Uber, and Stripe, not through a sales team, but through the bottom of the org chart, quietly, one developer at a time. Cursor deliberately held off on an aggressive outbound sales motion until the demand inside these companies had already become overwhelming. By the time whole engineering teams were depending on it daily, IT and procurement weren't being sold a new tool. They were simply being asked to formalize a relationship that already existed in practice. Then came the moment that turned quiet adoption into industry-wide validation. NVIDIA's chief executive, Jensen Huang, publicly named Cursor his favorite enterprise AI service and said the company's engineers were now all coding with AI assistants. That single endorsement, paired with the productivity gains teams were already reporting internally, gave Cursor the leverage to convert scattered bottom-up usage into full organization-wide deployments. Enterprise contracts quickly became a major share of revenue. Building a moat. Underneath the hype. As Cursor scaled, its team understood a risk hiding underneath all that growth, what you might call the API wrapper trap. Any startup whose product is simply a thin layer over someone else's foundation model has no real defensibility. Competitors, including the model providers themselves, can replicate that layer in a matter of months. So Cursor invested in its own proprietary models, trained specifically on developer workflows. It still routes the heaviest reasoning tasks to frontier models built by others, but its own models now power the low-latency, workflow-specific features that make the product feel instantaneous, like Cursor Tab, which predicts a developer's next edits across multiple files in milliseconds. Every time a user accepts or rejects one of those suggestions, that signal feeds back into the system. The result is a compounding data advantage that gets harder to copy with every passing day. a moat built not from secrecy, but from sheer accumulated usage. What the story teaches us. Step back from the numbers for a moment, and a clear set of principles emerges from Cursor's climb. The first is to skip the infrastructure and own the interface. By forking an open-source giant instead of building a plugin on top of someone else's platform, Cursor bypassed years of foundational work and seized control of the layer where AI differentiation actually happens. The second is to market to the power user before you market to everyone. Diluting your positioning to chase a mass audience on day one can cost you the very credibility that drives genuine word of mouth. Elite users are not just customers. They are a distribution channel, and their endorsement carries weight no advertisement can buy. The third is to treat pricing as a marketing lever, not just a revenue mechanism. A free tier generous enough to deliver real value lets users experience the product's worth before a paywall ever interrupts them. Usage-based pricing on top of that signals confidence and ties revenue directly to the value being delivered. The fourth is to let the product carry the distribution. If a piece of software needs an elaborate sales deck to explain why it matters, it likely isn't ready yet. The strongest products create visible, shareable moments within minutes of someone opening them. And the fifth is to delay enterprise sales until you already have leverage. Rather than burning cash on outbound efforts to manufacture artificial demand, let product-led growth quietly carry the tool inside organizations first. Bring in a sales motion only once it's there to formalize and expand something that already exists. Closing. Cursor's sprint toward $2 billion in annual recurring revenue is a signal worth paying attention to, well beyond one company's success. It suggests that the era of software companies winning purely by outspending each other on advertising may be giving way to something else entirely. Cursor didn't buy attention. It built a product so precisely aligned with the needs of a small, influential, and deeply respected audience that the market did the selling on its behalf. In a world increasingly shaped by AI, the most powerful marketing strategy available to any company may simply be a product good enough to redefine what its users are capable of. This was the Marketing Behind Rapid Growth. See you in the next episode.